So what happens when the very people you raised, the ones who are supposed to care for you when you're older, become the one thing you're most afraid of? Today, we're diving into a landmark court case that really forced India to look this painful question right in the eye, and in doing so, it completely changed the game for the rights of elderly citizens.
Right off the bat, you get this quote. And look, this isn't just some dry legal jargon. This single sentence from an early court order just cuts right to the heart of the tragedy here. It tells you this isn't about property. It's about a deep personal trauma being inflicted by family. And that leads us to the massive question at the center of this whole thing. I mean, it sounds simple, right? Can you kick out an abusive kid? But the answer was, believe it or not, super complicated, buried under a mess of confusing laws and conflicting court decisions all over the country. One family's future, and really a precedent for the entire nation, all hung on this one question. Okay, so to really get why the court made the decision it did, we first have to understand what was actually going on inside that home. Because this wasn't some simple family squabble. No, the evidence painted a really grim picture of a home basically under siege from the inside.
So let's meet Leelawati and William Das. They're both 87 years old and they are in the thick of it, health-wise. She's fighting breast cancer, plus heart and kidney problems. He's got severe hypertension. In fact, the court documents specifically said that the stress from all this harassment directly caused his kidneys to fail. And here's the real kicker. They didn't even own the house. They were just legal tenants, which made their whole situation even more fragile.
And who was the source of all this stress? Their son, Sunny Paul. You know, when you look at his background, as laid out in the case, it's pretty troubling. He was an ex-cop who'd been fired for misconduct, he had a criminal conviction for fraud, and the records showed he had a history of alcoholism.
The things the court heard were just awful. We're talking about physical assault, like breaking down locks to get into their rooms, constant mental harassment, and just a total failure to care for them when they were seriously ill. The tribunal didn't pull any punches either. They found his motive was, and I'm quoting here, a brutal lust to grab the house.
So with the battle lines drawn at home, the fight spilled over into the courtroom. But this was about more than just one family. This was really a test for a law that was supposed to protect India's most vulnerable people.
The whole case really came down to this one piece of legislation, the Senior Citizens Act of 2007. I mean, its goal sounds pretty clear, right? Maintenance and welfare for the elderly. But the entire legal fight boiled down to one question. What does welfare actually mean? Does it just mean money, or does it mean having the right to live in peace? And this question gets right to the heart of it. Was this law just meant to be a kind of piggy bank to make sure kids gave their parents financial support? Or could it be used as a shield, a tool you could actually use to physically remove an abuser and get some peace? The answer was, well, it was anything but clear. Both sides came at this from completely different angles, reading the law in two totally opposite ways. It created this huge legal showdown.
This slide just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have the son's lawyers. They're going for a super strict literal reading of the law. They're saying, hey, this law is about money, not eviction. Plus, my client's parents are just tenants. They never signed a deed over to me, so this part of the law doesn't even apply. But then, the parents' lawyers come back and say, whoa, hold on. Look at the spirit of the law. The goal is welfare, and you can't have welfare if you're living in constant fear. They argue that just letting him live there was a transfer of rights, and that his abuse completely broke that trust.
And this wasn't just a theoretical debate, you know? Courts all over India were completely split on this. High courts in Delhi and Kerala had actually ruled against eviction before. But then you had the Punjab and Haryana High Court, and they'd gone the other way, saying, yeah, eviction is totally justified because ensuring peaceful living is the whole point. So the stage was set for a major decision.
So, faced with this family in total crisis and a law being pulled in two different directions, the Delhi High Court came back with a judgment that was, honestly, incredibly powerful and transformational.
The court started by leaning on this really powerful idea from the Supreme Court. It basically says, look, if a law is designed to fix a problem, you have to interpret it in a way that actually fixes the problem. It's common sense, right? A solution that doesn't solve anything is useless. This was a huge signal that they were not going to get bogged down in the tiny details.
The court's whole argument hinged on cleverly redefining two key words. First up was property. The son's whole argument was that his parents were just tenants, not owners. But the court looked closer at the law and saw that it defines property as including rights or interests. And a legal tenancy? That is absolutely a protected right or interest.
Boom, just like that, the parents and their home were covered by the act.
And then came the real game changer. They redefined transfer. The son said there was no formal deed, but the court said, look, in a family, a transfer isn't always some stamped legal document. Simply giving your kid permission to live in your home is a transfer of the right to live there. And crucially, that permission comes with an unspoken condition, that you'll be treated with basic decency and respect.
And that led the court to the final, unavoidable conclusion. If the son's abuse broke that implied condition of care, then the transfer, his permission to be there, is legally canceled. And if he no longer has a right to be in the house, well, the only logical next step is that he has to leave. Eviction.
Now this ruling, it was so much more than just a victory for Leelawati and William Das. Its shockwaves literally created a new legal reality for millions of elderly people all across India. The Sunny Paul case, as it's now known, set an incredibly powerful precedent. It confirmed, once and for all, that the Senior Citizens Act wasn't just a piggy bank. It was a shield. It gave courts and tribunals across the country the clear power to protect seniors by physically removing the source of their abuse.
And the impact was immediate. This wasn't just some abstract legal idea. It was turned into a clear, simple rulebook. After this case, Delhi put a 5-step process into law. Now, an elderly person can go straight to the district magistrate, who investigates, holds a quick hearing, and if the abuse is proven, can issue an eviction order that the police can enforce. The principle became a procedure that could literally save lives.
So the case of Sunny Paul gives us a legal answer, but it leaves all of us with a much, much deeper question, doesn't it? It forces us to think about family, about duty, about safety, and what it really means to provide for the welfare of the people who once provided for us. It's a question the law has answered in this one instance, but it's one that every single family has to answer for itself.